Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. Storycraft, of course, is a segment where I do a craft and I tell you a story. And right now, we are in the middle of spooky season. We're getting closer and closer every week. I'm very excited for Halloween. I have this idea, and I mentioned it in my last video, to collect some user-submitted paranormal spooky stories. And I am still collecting those. Shout out to the people who already sent me theirs. I got some really great stories so far, and I'm just so excited. I would love to make it like a nice long segment that you guys can just play on Halloween and listen to some like spooky stories. So if you have a spooky story, whether it be ghostly, generally paranormal, cryptid base, alien, or just, something unexplained, I would love to hear about it. And you can send it to me via any of my socials or my email directly. It's in the description box down below. And like I said, I've already gotten a couple, so I'm like getting progressively more hyped. There is some time, so don't stress yourself about like trying to get like the perfect story written in a short amount of time. There's some weeks until October, but I would like to read it by October. So if you could shoot it to me, sometime in the next month, that would be swell. Like I said, I have some pretty good ones already, and I, of course, want to share one of my own stories there. I'm going to save my spookiest ghost story, but I thought it would be a little bit strange of me to be like, send me your stories, send me content, without actually sharing some of my own stories with you. So I'm going to share today a totally, real thing that happened to me. Whether it was really ghostly or not, I feel like it was ghost story, and I will just preface this or disclaimer this by saying that this is, of course, my own personal experience, but this is going to be me reading the story that I sent to Joy over at the Wild Historian, formerly Witch Mooncraft. So if you've heard me talk about Witch Mooncraft, she's now the Wild Historian on Instagram, and she words are really hard right now. She and Carly, her and Carly. I don't know why I can't talk anymore. No, I do know why. I have this issue every time I start recording. Her and Carly, she and Carly, Joy and Carly used to do live streams, and they still do, but they're like a little bit more sporadic now. Where they would tell some ghost stories that were like user submitted, and then read the tarot to do some medium work to get to the bottom of the ghost story and sort of figure out like what was going on, the mystery behind the story. And I've submitted a couple stories to them in the last 2 years, which was surprising. I didn't realize that we had been friends that long, but we have, so hooray for long-lasting friendships. But also, I've sent them a couple of stories, and so I thought I would just pull from that pool, since I've already typed them out and I don't have to do any extra work to do that. But that was also my inspiration for doing like a collaborative ghost story segment in October. So that's why I'm trying to collect these stories, because I think it was a really fun idea when they did it. I think it'll be a really fun idea when we do it. It'll just be fun, and it's like a fun community thing to share. So that being said, if you have a story, send it to me. I will love to read, even if it's a short little blurb. I will definitely read it. I will totally do it. I'm really excited to do it. If it's a super long story, I will also read that too. If you are concerned about your ability to write, or maybe not having the time to type everything out, you can just send me like voice messages on Instagram, or if you're like on Facebook, you could send me one there. I do have Messenger, so you can send me a longer voice message there, or you can do voice to text or whatever. I can help you edit it. It's not a big deal. I have time. I'm always in front of a computer, so it is what it is. We can get it done. I just think it's a fun idea, and I'm really excited to do it. So if you have a story, definitely shoot it over, send it to me. But for right now, I'm going to read you guys one of my earlier ghost stories. Not my earliest. That one I'll save for October, but one of my earlier ghost stories. Because yeah, I do believe in ghosts. Although I'm also pretty skeptical about things, so I am the person who'd be like, that was just gravity, or like, the shift in the Earth's rotation caused that thing to fall over, or some bullshit that I say to like discredit things. to myself. I never say that to other people. Like, you believe what you believe. But I do believe in ghosts. And I do think that, like, there's lingering energies and things are haunted. And I can honestly just talk about, like, my theories for ghosts for a very long time. But that's not why we're here. We're here to hear my ghost story. So let's get into it. And I just want to, like, throw in as an aside, I am just reading what I sent to somebody else. So it is a very, like, formal, typed up thing. It's not going to be, like, from memory because I don't want to miss any of the details. And as we all know, speaking is not my strong suit, although I continue to do it on YouTube for fun. But here we are. Like, we're just working through it. Also, I just want to, like, throw in there, I had to delete a comment from somebody because they were just an ass. I have a speech impediment and I have gone to some speech therapy to get past it. But I don't need people to point it out to me that, like, the way that I talk is disruptive or upsetting or anything like that. Get stuffed. I'm working with what I got, and what I got isn't a lot, but I'm doing my best. And honestly, this is free content on the internet, so I don't know what to tell you except for FUCKYOU. I'm not pulling my punches because I am afraid to swear. Pulling my punches because my grandmother listens to these stories. And I have to remind myself of that sometimes. So let's jump into it. When I was 9 years old, I was on a Pee Wee softball team. Sometimes after a game, the coach would take us to get pizza with some of the parents. And I lived in a small town that was literally built on, like, the remnants of the old settlement. So nothing really made that more apparent than the fact that the pizza place was at the bottom of, like, a small mountain-like hill that the original settlers' graveyards, like, were, like, at the very top. And for whatever reason, possibly because of the addition of some older kids in the mix, my softball team decided to climb up this little mini mountain and check out the graveyard. And of course, this was the late 90s, so our parents naturally let us go outside unattended at night and scale a 5-foot wall and then a rocky mountainside in the dark. Shout out to all my 90s kids. After a fair bit of scrambling and sliding, we made our way all the way up to the top. Also, as an aside, I was going to point out, I grew up in the desert, so, like, snakes, scorpions, we had them. Nobody cared. We just climbed this mountain. The scene could not have been spookier if we had set it up ourselves. Nighttime in the desert is something else entirely, and add to that, like, a broken down, ramshackle, 100-year-old graveyard with a decaying wooden fence, and you have a recipe for childhood terror. Trauma. I remember as soon as I made it to the top, my stomach dropped, and I was overwhelmed with, like, a wave of foreboding. Foreboding? Why did I say that weird? Foreboding. I also maybe discovered at that moment that I had a huge fear of heights, but that's neither here nor there. I called out to my teammates, like, we're not welcome here, you guys. And I don't know what or why, like, I was suddenly possessed to say that. I never had an intuitive compulsion like that before, but I knew as soon as I said it that nothing could be truer. One of the older girls told me that I'd be fine as long as I crossed myself, cut to me furiously crossing myself despite being a tiny godless heathen. And I made it about halfway into the graveyard, like, marveling at the crumbling stones, when I started to feel this chill, like, only on my face. And it was like I had stuck my face into a freezer, but even colder. I backed up quickly and stood on the other side of the fence and started calling out to my team to leave. And being willful children, of course, they ignored me. And I debated whether I wanted to climb back down on my own or stay there in case they needed me, which is baby Leo energy. I turned my back to the graveyard and tried to shut out the mounting terror in my chest. Everything in me said to run away, and I felt that chill again, this time on my shoulders. It was like someone's icy hands had clasped my shoulders to keep me from running. Then I heard the screaming. I was frozen to the spot, both figuratively and literally by the hands that were gripping me tightly, and the girls on my team came running past me and scrambled one after the other over the edge and down the mountain, but I was stuck in place. I started praying out loud, like, please, somebody help me. Anybody, please. And All at once, the cold presence left me, and I started to feel like a gentle warmth around me. And a soft voice of a woman whispered in my ear, "You're going to be okay. Go back inside. You have nothing to fear." And I felt the barest touch on the top of my head, and all my fear was forgotten. I climbed down the hillside, only to remember when I got to the concrete wall that I have discovered a newfound fear of heights, and it took an adult to get me down the rest of the way. Back inside, when I talked to the other girls, they told me that they had heard a voice tell them to get out of the graveyard, and that's why they had all taken off running. And I remember being surprised because I didn't hear anything at all like that. But then I saw some of the adults smile knowingly, and I knew what had happened. When I asked who had grabbed my shoulders, they looked at me in confusion. "No one grabbed you. You were just standing there by yourself." They laughed it off, and I went home that night with a new fear of graveyards at dark and questions about that particular spirit that answered my call. So fast forward about 20-ish years later to a dark Samhain night, or Samhain time-ish night, where it was me and my best friend, and we took a late night drive and decided to stop at this random graveyard that we found that she had never seen before, which should have been our first red flag because she had lived there for well over a decade and had never come across this tiny little graveyard, despite it basically being in her backyard. And we walked up to the gate, and as soon as she opened it to walk inside, I heard that same voice from my childhood, this time in a super exasperated tone, say, "I would have thought you'd know better than this by now." And we both felt this like huge wave of malice from the energies in that graveyard, and we promptly turned around and we noped right on out of there. And I felt this presence, a few times during the course of my life after this incident, and a few times before the childhood, like before the graveyard in my 20s, but after the graveyard in my youth. Usually around the time when I was like extremely ill or during like a particularly vicious night terror, there was always like this presence that would come through, providing a sense of like comfort and encouragement. And I know that whoever the spirit is, it's a super loving presence, and it always feels a little bit grandmotherly. But as both of mine are still alive, I think it's a little bit older than that. And whoever she is, I know that she's absolutely fed up with my lack of sense. But I really appreciate her presence in my life, and I'm actively trying to figure out who she is so I can properly thank her for standing by me all these years. But for now, I'm going to stick to visiting graveyards in the daylight hours. And that's my little ghost story, my little baby Priscilla ghost story. I will say, I know that the adults had climbed up the other side of the mountain, and when I say like mountain, I don't mean like the Rockies or the Alps. It was like a little tiny like desert mountain, bigger than a hill, but like mountainous. I don't know how to describe it. But I know that one of the other adults climbed up the other side to scare the kids out of the graveyard. And when I got older, we found out that there weren't actually any bodies in the graveyard. They had moved all the bodies to the historical site where they had like a little tiny museum for the town. But they had left all the headstones there, which I don't know why. I guess that was the part that they were worried about moving. So we found out like all the graves were empty when we got older, and that made everyone feel even sillier, but I never felt any differently about the graveyard. I definitely never went back up there. There was a couple more, softball games and pizza parties, and they definitely kept climbing back up there to go see the ghost. And after that point, I was like, no, I'm not going back up there. You have me fucked up. Like, that's not happening. Because that first encounter was enough. It was terrifying. I don't even know how to describe it beyond feeling like the coldest I've ever felt in my life, and like my shoulders hurt from how hard I was being like held in place. And when I had told my mom about it later, she just sort of wrote it off as like me being scared of a graveyard and like being childish. And I was like so upset because I just wanted to like explain to her that a ghost grandma had come to save me. And she was just like, "You're goofy, you're silly, like you're making it up." And I was like, "No, I swear." And like to this day, I remember like that presence. I remember that I think about it every time I step into a graveyard. Anytime I go to like a funeral or anything like that, I always think about like, what if the freezing ghost is here? And it's not, thankfully. I think it was just there. As I know right now, I think that whole graveyard is gone because it's all been paved over for development. But, you know, since we just talked about like poltergeist previously and bodies moving, I thought this was a very appropriate story for this week since it has bodies that have been moved in it. I guess that was the only parallel I could really draw. But yeah, I don't really know a lot about this ghost. I do some ancestor work, and I kind of have that feeling that like this like grandmother ghost presence that's been like helping me out and comforting me when I'm like super stressed or sick is definitely a relative, like in my long line of ancestors, but it doesn't feel like a recent relative. This feels like in the way, way long ago type of relative, like a way back then ancestor. So I don't really have a lot of information to go off of. I have felt really compelled to get like a DNA test because I am like super mixed, and I feel like that's her compulsion telling me to go do it so that I could maybe pin down some of my roots better and understand like where she comes from. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Have you had like an experience like this? Have you ever had like a grandma ghost like watching out for you? Or have you ever been to a graveyard where you showed up and it was like, get the fuck out, don't come in here? Because that's exactly what happened when my best friend and I went there to that graveyard by her house, which she had never seen before, which is the wildest thing. Like, that girl knew the whole like city like the back of her hand, had never seen that place before. So like by the end of the night, I had convinced myself that that graveyard was like a ghost graveyard because we never found it again. Like, we drove by and couldn't see it. So I feel like that was like the ghost graveyard. The ghost graveyard. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't our graveyard. That was like for them. And they didn't want us in there because we literally walked up and it just felt like this overwhelming sense of dread and terror. And it was like, get the fuck out. And we were like, absolutely, you're correct. And when I heard that message come through, I was just like, oh, you know what? This instinct is correct. We're going to follow through on that. This is not for us. This is not our place. And it was just so wild because I've never had an experience like that walking into a graveyard where I've been like repelled by the energy there. Like, that's it. It literally felt repellent, which was wild to me. What else can I say about it? I guess that's it. I guess that's all I have to say because I'm now searching for things to talk about. And I think I've rambled a little bit afterwards enough, but let me know what you guys think. Like I said, if you've had an experience like this, I would love to hear it. I would definitely love to hear it in the form of a message directly to me so that I could put it into the special. If you have ever had like a fell encounter with a graveyard, I would also like to know that. And if you've ever met the freezing ghost, I don't have a better name for it, but I'm going to call it the freezing ghost. It's going in my lexicon. It's going to be one of my 13 ghosts. Shout out if you get the reference. You're a real one. It's not a very subtle reference, but yeah. I feel like the freezing ghost is not just a singular phenomena, and so I would definitely like to hear if anyone else has ever encountered this particular type of entity, and just what your stance on ghosts are in general. Do you believe in ghosts? I would love to know. But that's gonna be it for me this week, you guys. I will be back with another historical, factual, historical account for you guys on the next one. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces, and I'll catch you guys next time. Till then, happy crafting. Bye!